I don't think it's gonna be that hard to do in a sense. No. It's just like I already know what I'm gonna write about, even though I haven't read the book.
Yay! Oh no! And we're live. No one's on it though, because no one has the link.
Into the something.
Okay, there we go. Hey Archie, is it okay if I go to your email and send it to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Haha, okay. All right. Sorry about that. We're starting over.
No problem. So we're live.
We are live, so that's a success.
Hello, world.
I think the
we're missing 2 people. Oh, all right.
Hey.
Missing 1 person. Okay, I sent it, so I can
send it to Ryan.
Yep.
Yeah, but the school.
I'll send it from mine.
Oh, yeah.
While you guys were gone, we were chit-chatting. It was fun.
Do it from your last. Hi. Okay.
building report.
What happened to Emma?
We lost Emma.
Emma's still waiting on the other call, probably.
No.
They're gonna come back. No.
All right, you all got a message from me.
Yep. Let's see.
Hey Archie, I think I can reply to your email.
No, I got it.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna.
There we go.
Oh, Emma.
To Rise.
So
Here we go.
Cool. That's fine.
Are you laughing at me?
Yes.
It's okay. At me, with me, as long as you're laughing.
That's fine. That's a good outlook.
I like to think that if all works out well, I'll be like Mayim Bialik, who got her PhD in neuroscience and then went on to be on the Big Bang Theory. So maybe we should have a sitcom about economists. I'm just saying.
Alternate career paths. That's it. It can happen. It can happen. They talk about career paths out of grad school. You know, you can go policy, you can go academia.
You can go comedy.
You can go entertainment. You can go comedy. You know, you can go. I don't know if you guys are at the stage yet to be going to ASSA meetings, but you know the yearly convening of economists they have at some city everywhere across the country. But they do have an Econ comedy hour.
I heard it was terrible.
I've never been.
Sorry if anyone from that is watching this.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if it's
hold it against me.
Maybe they're great. Maybe they're cutting edge comedy. I haven't seen it. It's always like at 8 o'clock on a Saturday or 9 o'clock on a Saturday. And it's like, you know, there's something to be done.
All right. Sorry about that interlude. We had some issues, but it sounds like we're all back. And Alex, do you want to introduce yourself? We already went around the rest of us.
Great, sure. Sorry for the delay. I'm Alex Albright. I graduated from Williams in 2014, and then I worked as a research assistant at Stanford for 2 years, and now I'm getting my PhD in economics at Harvard. And I'm interested in criminal justice topics and social economics more broadly. And yeah, I'm part of Grad Women in Econ over at Harvard with Emma, who's also on the call. Yeah, and I'm happy to be here to talk to you all.
Thank you. What is your experience in grad school been like so far?
So I think that grad school is really interesting because I feel like it can kind of be broken into 2 pieces, because there is this first piece in your first and second year where you are doing classes again and taking exams and like living this student life. But then in the backdrop, you're slowly developing research ideas at the same time. And I'm a 3rd year right now, which means that I'm like the baby researcher, and I'm starting to actually have my own projects and be in charge of my own life in this way that I feel like you kind of aren't first and second year. But I really like the transition, and I've been having a great time trying to do practice talks, inviting people to come hear my ideas, going to hear theirs as well, and getting more involved with like the broader community at Harvard. So people who are in other PhD programs. I think that the first 2 years or so, you're kind of in your own department a lot. But as you get older, you get this opportunity to expand out, which I've really been enjoying.
Dope.
I think it's also so helpful. So I'm not in grad school yet, but something that I found really helpful, especially when I was in Chicago, was to find friends in other departments. Not what I'm saying is like it's really good to be in friendships where you can talk about your research in like the most high level way possible, and then you just move on. I had a lot of friends who were chemists, and so they couldn't talk about the minutia of what they were doing in the lab, and I couldn't talk about what I was working on, and it was great because you were forced, like we were academics, so we understood each other's schedules, and that sometimes we had to work on weekends, and a lot of times we had to work on weekends. But like at least there's this understanding that might be something that you have to do, and there's no questioning of that. But at least you don't have to talk about your research or your field all the time. Not that having friends who are economists is bad. It's also great, but it's also great to have other friends.
Yeah, and kind of drilling in on that in a sort of different direction. One of the things that we do at the New School a lot, or we emphasize, is interdisciplinary work. And it's one of the things that I'm like really passionate about. And so on that same tip, like having friends in different departments is cool because you can develop projects, that kind of cross disciplinary boundaries in a certain way. And that's, I think, where a lot of really interesting social science happens when you're looking at, these same, because in a lot of ways, all the social sciences are studying the same subject matter, which is human life and well-being. And so if you have friends who are sociologists, you might talk to them about how they're looking at this particular issue. Or if you know some epidemiologists, or if you know somebody who's doing psych, like those are, good relationships to try to cultivate. Of course, not purely from I can get research out of this sort of thing, but it's, it's a good thing that can happen as an externality to meeting people outside of your department. So I definitely think that's a good approach to take generally.
Okay.
Oh, and if you maintain your friends from college, especially at a place like Williams, where it's a small school, so a lot of your friends are not in your department, then you already have them.
Still did.
So maintain them.
Mm-hmm. That's so important.
My piece of advice for college grads: maintain your friends.
Friends are important, man. Your friends will help you make it through grad school. They're the essential part. You need a social support system. You have to have one. Like that's if you have anything else, like study skills are super important, but you have to have a support system. So yeah, hands down, keep that.
Okay, so as we move on and talk about support systems, how have you built a community and support system in and outside of academia?
I'll let somebody start.
Alex, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I think that something that I found hard at the beginning of grad school was like building up a support system, because I think that I felt it was hard to like be vulnerable about what you were going through at the beginning, because you're all just meeting each other. And I think that it's been really nice, especially in this third year that I'm in right now, to like be engaging with each other's work in this way, where if someone wants you to come to a practice talk, you like offer your time to them in this way that then they want to offer their time back to you. And I think that that's such a nice like community building thing, to have these informal group meetings about research. But even beyond that, just like continuing to do the things that you're passionate about before graduate school. So I played ultimate Frisbee at Williams, and I played on the ultimate Frisbee team at Harvard here for the last few years. And continuing to be doing these things that you're passionate about that are like completely separate from academia has been just super important to me. And I think has just been really helpful in like meeting people from outside of econ, but also meeting those within them. So yeah, continuing things that you're passionate about, and also trying to like be vulnerable with the people who you're in your program with. And again, I'll give a shout out to the grad women in econ at Harvard. It's been really helpful for building community for me at least in this past year, and trying to just talk about things that we all care about and like want to come together and talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 100% spot on, at least from my experience. You know, I have a group of folks that, you know, I've known since high school, and, you know, we still regularly stay in contact, and we're kind of doing different things now, but, you know, we stay in contact. I've got my, you know, people use group messaging systems all the time now. So I've got my group me's from my high school friends, grouping with my college folks, and, you know, and one for grad school people. And I think all of those networks are so vital to, you know, making it through courses, and just, you know, when you're having a tough time in grad school, because those times come up, like those people that you have gone through some of the similar things with over time and who know you are those people who you can be vulnerable with in those ways that Alex said, and they're so important. Because you know, there's a lot of insecurities and such that might come up when you're in grad school, because you're thinking, you know, imposter syndrome is a real thing. You know, feeling like you can't ask certain questions because you don't want to seem like you're behind or whatever. Like all of that stuff that may have happened in undergrad may not, but it might happen in grad school because the material is more difficult. You're kind of thrown in the deep end in a lot of situations. And so it's really important to be able to look to somebody who's with you or who's been with you through other hard times. Say like, hey, this is kind of tough, isn't it? And they know who you are, they know how you've worked. And so like you can relate on that level and say like, hey, you've made it this far, you can continue to make it through. And yes, this is difficult. I know it because I'm going through it too. I got folks who, you know, those relationships have just been extremely important for me. So I 100% co-signed with Alex's whole thing. Yeah, you need those folks.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, definitely, like on the academic side, being able to be open and honest with your classmates, I think, like when you are able to do that is just amazing. I think the reality is that it really varies by cohort. I mean, my cohort is awesome. Like we're all just incredibly open with each other about what's difficult, what we're struggling with, and just feel completely comfortable with that. And I've talked to like friends at UC Berkeley who will be like, oh, like I feel super uncomfortable with my cohort, and we all have like a really negative energy. But then like I have these friends from the cohort above us, and like everyone there is chill with each other. So like it really does just happen to vary with the group, is my impression. And so like if you like, so some of it's just the luck of the draw. Like if you happen to get an open cohort, like at least be someone who's like ready to be vulnerable, understand that like absolutely everyone is pretty confused a decent amount of the time when you're like in your first year classes. Like, I mean, like maybe like there'll be certain classes where someone is great, but there'll be another class where they're really lost. Some people will be great at math, but be like, how on earth do I write a research idea? Like, and come up with like an experimental design, you know? So like everyone is going to have different strengths. And like you being comfortable and secure enough about like what you're not doing great in will also maybe like help your classmates feel like they can do that too. But again, reality is like you might get a great cohort, you might not. That's okay. But then like outside of the academic side, like definitely finding groups. I mean, it could be like a running group or a climbing group, whatever like activity you like to do. Or like, yeah, I think just like having something you do that's like not so related to academia where you have friends is really important. I think in general it's just like life advice, right? Yeah, that's
I'll
my
also
take.
say, for me, going to therapy has been incredibly helpful.
It's actually really
And yeah, like I completely advocate people who would need extra mental health support. And by extra, I mean like an epsilon above zero. Go to therapy. I like when I started this job, I was very insecure. I did not have the group of RAs was pretty quiet and insular. And I have a pretty big and loud personality, and I felt very out of place. And therapy helped me not quit. And in college, when I was the only woman in my upper level econ classes, like therapy helped me not quit. The other thing that I would say is there are a lot of people who have probably believed in you up until this point that would also like you to not quit. And if, I don't know, in moments where I've felt a lot of imposter syndrome or like was told explicitly that I didn't belong, I turned to some of my Swarthmore professors and they were huge support. So I think staying in touch with not just your friends, but like faculty can, especially faculty that have supported you, can be really, really helpful.
Nice.
Then it feels like you have grown-ups in your corner.
So like on that topic of in terms of identities, as a person of color, as a woman, as LGBTQ, what are some of the resources you have leveraged at your institution or outside of your institution? What networks you have used to help you kind of feel community in these environments and economics, especially?
So I'll say there is there's the National Economic Association, and that's often partnered with the American Society of Hispanic Economists. So that's NEA and ASH. They host regular events throughout the year at annual economics conferences where they'll have receptions and panels where you can present papers and present your work. They have a summer convening that's associated with the AEA's summer mentoring program, which happens every year. So those have been kind of organizations that I could be a part of that I think it just kind of matters to know that there are people who look like you in the field, right? Because in a lot of places you really don't get that impression, right? I think in my graduate department, I think there were two black guys in the department, but then one of them graduated, and so then there was me, and I don't think anybody's come since me. So it's kind of tough being the only one to an extent, but it helps to know that there are folks out there in the discipline, right? And I know women are underrepresented in the field as well. So it's a good thing that there are these institutions and organizations that exist for folks to be able to come together and say, like, look, even if in the big room it's hard to find us, we can go to this smaller room and see everybody there. That's been beneficial for me in terms of like feeling like I kind of belong in the discipline. So those have been very valuable for me. And then of course, like we've been mentioning earlier, the networks that I built, in my undergrad, that's been helpful. I went to HBCU, and a lot of my peers who went there are also in their graduate programs, and they're the only black person in their graduate programs. So it's good to be able to like connect and have, at least kind of share that experience and have somebody talk through those issues with. So yeah, those organizations and then your friend groups that you build in other places, this kind of helped me through.
All three of them are like, no.
I'll just say that I think that there's structured support in the form of formal groups, but there's also just like informal networks that can be very supportive. My office this year is all women, which is like an amazing thing where every morning I wake up and Like if I go into the office, it's like all 6 of us are like these women in the program, and that's the sort of thing like you never see. Like people often are like, "Whoa, your office is all women," and we were like, "Yeah, that was a planned thing. We wanted to like all be together and get, and you know, like just even working every day and like looking around in the room, it starts to feel like, yeah, that's right. Like we do run this room, and then you know when you leave the room and you feel like you're part of the smaller population, you know, you still have that like strength that you built from hours of working together. And I think that that's something that's really important. And even just like having also like I think administrators in departments are people who like we often don't literally like give enough credit to. You know, there's professors, there's students, but there's also like tons of staff around, and staff can be really supportive people who I feel like often in econ departments we have a lot of like female staff people, and they're often also like very much feel what you're saying. Sometimes if you want to like talk about something related to gender or related to your experience, there's a lot of like people who are around who maybe aren't part of some like structured group, but are like open to hearing you, talking to you, supporting you. So like just chatting with a lot of people around the department, often who are staff who we like overlook, sometimes have been really great supports to me. We have an administrator at Harvard who like everyone loves, and we all know that like she's the real chair of the department. Because and like that's a like ongoing joke that like we always make at like every like event, and like the chair will often make that joke too. But it's great to like have someone who's in such a high position who is a woman who like wants to talk, who is open, their door is open to talk about a lot of these things. So that's something that's been great for me.
Yeah, I would also just add, I know we already mentioned the Grad Women in Econ group.
This is just an advertisement for our group.
Yeah, it's actually what the cool thing is.
You're on Twitter. It's at.
Yeah, right? I'm sure. I mean, are we actually? Alex,
Yeah, no,
you would know. We do. Okay, of course. But yeah, so GWE honestly has just been really fantastic. I think like there's sort of two aspects to it. One is that like if we want to sort of address some of the issues around underrepresentation, then like coming together in a critical mass where we can actually brainstorm on these topics and try to come up with solutions is essential. And I think the GWE can do some of that, which is so that in of itself is awesome and it feels really empowering, even if progress can seem slow. But I think there's that aspect, and then there's the aspect of knowing that like twice a month you're going to be sitting in a room full of people who look like you or experiencing similar things to you, or thinking about the experiences that they're having in a way that like other people might not, like realizing those interpretations. Maybe that just got very abstract, but I think the point is that like you all like have a lot in common, right? And just getting to have those meetings, I think, really is an awesome experience, and getting to like build relationships with these people. I think I was kind of mentioning this earlier, but the fact that like I met like later year students through the program who like I otherwise wouldn't like don't think I would have interacted with much. So I think like getting to establish all of those friendships early on is just a really unique opportunity. So I think programs like that, to the extent that like you want to be in like an identity-oriented program, identity-oriented group, those kinds of groups are really awesome.
I really leveraged potential allies as well. So when I first started my RA position, I like explicitly brought up the fact that I was an immigrant and that I was a woman to the people that I'm working for. And I said, like, I want to be treated the exact same way. I like want to make sure that we're on both sides of this. We're taking action to make sure that it's not going to be a problem, especially because I was the first woman to work for the people that I work for. And so for me, it was just really important to have this be a point. And they were invested. They are still very invested in me and my academic career. And I think like keeping that in mind as, you know, like, yes, we can talk about diversity in these very abstract terms, but at the end of the day, it's still people that we're thinking about, and being very actionable about the people that you can be very actionable about can be incredibly helpful. The other thing I was going to say is there's there are all these like hidden networks on the internet. And sometimes you'll find out about it and like, oh, I'd like to join this. So literally 10 minutes before this call, I joined a WhatsApp group of female Brazilian economists. So, yeah.
That's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. Also, in our interlude, we were talking about Econ Twitter a little bit.
Twitter's the best.
So I haven't, used it that much, but I feel like that could also be one of those places where you can build some networks and see some folks who are at least talking about the things you're thinking about, and hopefully relating some of the experiences they're having in grad school from different perspectives. So look into those as well. Get involved, follow some folks, see what happens.
Anything from behind me, then one question is there anything that you would have told yourself in undergrad about research or grad school if you had the chance?
Absolutely, yes. So my number one rule that, I'm still working through this. I still had to figure this out. I'm still telling myself this all the time. Is that, and bear with me a little bit because it's a little bit counterintuitive, but hard work's not the answer, right? Mm. So, and that's not even necessarily just saying, oh, work smart, not hard or whatever. So it's there. We kind of might come through undergrad and get into grad school with this idea that, it's fine if I, wait a long time. But if I can, put together this 20-page paper in one night, or if I can just like stay up long enough with this book and keep staring at it for a really long time, that's the way to become a scholar, right? That's how you do it. You just work harder and harder and harder and harder, and then eventually you figure it out. And that's what everybody's done to get to where they are. And so that's the way to be a grad student. And honestly, that's probably the best recipe for burnout that you could ever put together. And it's something that's doable in undergrad because the workload is not quite the same. But when you get to grad school and keep throwing yourself against this wall like that, that's what's really going to cause you. That's what causes folks to fizzle out, by about beginning of October or so in the semester. Like you've been throwing yourself at this stuff like over and over and over again, like by yourself. The key to it is to, again, utilize the support system that you have. Talk to people about your work. Like talk to people about problem sets, build a group that's working on these things together. Like the idea that you can just do all of this stuff by yourself alone, and if you work hard enough, you'll figure it out. Like it's the source of so much psychological stress for folks, and it was for me personally, right? So I fell to burnout, quite a few times in my grad school career. And it's because, I got in my head and told myself, you're not working hard enough on this. So just stay up and figure this out and just keep throwing yourself at it. And it gets wrapped up in this mindset that like, if you're not doing it alone, then you're not good enough to do this. And you should be here. If you can't figure this out by yourself, you're not enough to be here. And that's completely false, because the people who make it the furthest, even if you hold the level of work constant, because everybody in grad school knows how to work hard, otherwise they wouldn't be in grad school. The differentiating factor between the people who make it and people who don't make it, or people who make it further, I should say, are the folks who are able to build a team around them and like leverage each other's strengths to be able to move further in concert, right? Because you're less stressed. You get to leverage other people's perspectives on the same problems. You work through the same things faster and better when you have somebody else working with you on those same problems. So that's definitely something that it took me a long time to figure out, and I'm still figuring it out. But I think it's an essential part to being a scholar, right? If you're going to be a good scholar, you have to be able to work with other people. So that's what I would tell my sophomore in high school, sophomore in college self, and my senior in college self, and my first year graduate school self. So yeah.
I think something that I would have definitely told myself is that Switching ideas isn't the same as quitting. So I think that when you're in undergrad, you get this idea that, like, you know, if you're going to start something, then you have to finish it, right? But something about research is that you might start something, it's a project that maybe has some promise, but then you get to a point where it's not really going anywhere. And the concept of leaving that project for a new project is like not something that I was ever attuned to in undergrad. And I don't think that that's something you ever get trained on, right? Because you have a short deadline. You kind of have to just finish whatever you're doing. But when you're in a grad school program, you now actually have this opportunity to say, oh, well, actually, I would rather spend my time doing something else. And that's not the same as quitting. That's just respecting my time and being curious about other potential things. And I think that very related, I think, you know, how we talk about there's like publication bias in papers. I think there's like this large like CV bias that exists where if you look at someone's resume, you just see the things that they published. You don't see all of the things that really are like under the hood of things that they worked on that didn't really pan out. And I just think, you know, until you're actually up and close with other researchers and you start to see that, you truly don't realize how many things didn't pan out. And that's not, so when it doesn't pan out for you, that's normal, right? It's not a case of like, oh, I'm not finishing things and other people, everything they've ever published was their first try on something. And that's an invisible thing. It's like part of the hidden curriculum, but it's very much a natural part of research and like not something that is bad.
That's super important, yo. Super important.
I would have told myself to have more patience. It goes in in a similar vein as the previous two comments, but I think I was just in such a rush to figure out what I wanted to be doing and like being really hard on myself. Oh, why do I not get this? Or like, why is this not a good fit for me? Why is this profession not going to be what I want to do? And then just like let myself figure it out a little bit more. And yeah, and like really learn how to, I would have told Stephanie, learn how to take care of yourself because that's going to be super important. I think I started learning that later, but I was in such a rush to like, the other thing I would have told myself, sorry, I'm going to cut that thought in the middle because it wasn't going to pan out. The second thing I'm going to say is I would have told myself that like, sorry, I lost my thought in making a joke. We'll come back. I'm going to remember. Sorry.
It's not going to work out, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Don't be ashamed. Cut it off.
I forgot.
Feel free to interrupt if it comes back.
I'm going to write it down.
Oh, you got it. Oh, go ahead.
No.
Oh,
I will write it down when it comes back.
All right. Yeah, two things. One related to like knowing how to take care of yourself. It's funny because earlier I was thinking about this panel and something that kind of occurred to me and I was like, is this too trivial to bring up? But like learn how to cook some decent food that you actually like. I think like, I don't know, like it's sort of like two aspects to this, right? Like one is that grad students like generally don't have a ton of money. I mean, this does vary by program actually, but like, let's just say generally don't have a ton of money. And like, you're going to be like short on time all the time. And you're going to be like already stressed out. You're going to want to eat something that's like, at least just like satisfying. And so either you're going to find yourself as like wanting to buy food all the time. Then you're going to be stressed out about your budget because you're a poor grad student, or you're just like not going to be eating food that you actually like. So like, don't focus on this too much, but like, it's worth just like, if you don't know how to cook, learn how to cook and like learn how to make some basic things that you actually enjoy. So that's one piece of advice. Something totally different. If you think that you do want to do an econ PhD, like take real analysis in undergrad. Like even if you're not sure, like if you think that's what you want to do. So like I was pretty sure I did not want to do a PhD. And so I took a bunch of really random classes. I took 2 semesters of chemistry my senior year because I enjoyed it. Like I have no regrets about that. It was awesome. Because like I didn't think I wanted to do an econ PhD. But then I had to take multivariable calculus, linear algebra, and real analysis, all while working and applying to grad school in 6 months. And like that sucked. So, like you really don't. So yeah, I mean, Steph can probably speak to this too. I mean, you mentioned like taking real analysis while working is hard, and like you also like you want to get an A in that class, or at least like you want to try to do as well as you can in that class. So like if this is something you think there's like a decent chance that you're gonna apply, then like do that while you're in undergrad. At the same time, like if you don't do it and you later realize you want to do Econ PhD, like there are ways to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remembered what I wanted to say. Well, I'm going to piggyback on the cooking thing and say I cook for the entire week on Sunday, and I just own a large collection of Tupperware containers. I know I can make one dish, like I can cook pretty well, but if I just cook one dish, then it's always going to be really good because I know I have to eat it for the whole entire week. So that works for me. Might not work for you, but that's my suggestion. Okay, what I wanted to tell myself in undergrad is that you don't compare yourself to other people in general, but especially don't compare yourself to people who are ahead of you in the journey because they have hours and hours and hours upon you of struggling and working and doing all the things that you are currently going through or doing. So one example is like, I was already an RA and I was like, why can't I figure this out? So I asked my boss, did you feel like this when you were a research assistant? He was like, yes. Don't beat yourself up because I have tens of thousands of hours of being an econ researcher on you. And, you know, you shouldn't compare the things you're struggling with to the things that, you know, your friend who is on the job market is struggling with to the things that, I don't know, like someone who is already a tenured professor is struggling with. Everyone is on a different path. Everyone's on a different timeline. I really didn't get that when I was in undergrad. I think I get it better now. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I forget it. But most of the time, I think it's some. I actually have a Post-it note on my desk that says like, "This is your point. This is other people's point. Don't compare."
Good point. Good point.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
also, the other thing is I spent a lot of time in undergrad trying to find the fire that would burn in my belly and would keep me going. And you just have to have patience with that. I think I did for the most part, but it's always nice to like know what is going to keep you going. And, you know, if there are things that, you know, you'll start working on it and then you'll stop looking at the clock and then you look at it and it's been 4 hours and you're like, wow, that's awesome.
Just to quickly build off of that, I think even if you are at the same place as someone else, right? Like if you are the same age, you are doing the same thing, even then, sometimes not worth comparing yourself to other people because you always have your things that you think that you're talented at that are different dimensions of research often. And I think that they can all be very equally valid, right? Like maybe you're not the fastest, so I'm talking about myself now. Maybe you're not the fastest person at doing a problem set, but maybe you feel really comfortable public speaking, right? Like those are two very useful things and they don't perfectly trade off, but you can always like, and I love the Post-it thing. I used to do that first year. I would have things written about like, you are great at this, you are great at this. And they would be in different places so that when you'd feel bad about other things, you'd still like you kind of like remind yourself about like why you are where you are. Or like why you had confidence at some point and why you still should. So I love that idea. And I think even within the same time frame, there are so many things that like you can be proud of yourself for that maybe don't map perfectly onto what someone else is good at.
Yeah. My therapist actually forced me to, I struggled a lot with the imposter syndrome. I still do, but I have a list that I have to keep updating where it's like, these are all the reasons why, you know, like this accomplishment is actually a valid accomplishment. It's not, they pulled it out of a hat. It's like, oh, yeah, no, like rationally speaking, I could look back to this and this is fine. And I'm fine and everything's going to work out.
Important.
Yeah.
So you guys talk a lot about like things you like in grad school. I'm just wondering, what's your least favorite thing about grad school?
Let's see. Least favorite thing about grad school. Okay.
I think some. Oh, sorry.
So I'll say this. My least favorite thing about grad school is, I think somebody mentioned it. I don't remember who used the phrase "hidden curriculum," but I think that is probably my least favorite part of it, because there are lots of things that are necessary that happen in grad school that, like, there's not a plan. There's not like a rubric on how to do this. Like, there's not a, you don't learn, like, they don't teach you, for example, they don't really teach you how to teach in grad school, right? They don't really teach you, there's not a blueprint for how to write a good dissertation, right? That's not a thing that's, I mean, there are guidelines and places you can find in different places, but like, it's not as clear cut as you would imagine. But lots of times there are some folks who talk about the process as if it's supposed to be just this natural thing that you just get to a certain point and you just know how to do. And I think that's one of the big myths about being a good graduate student that, you know, holds people up. And that's probably my least favorite thing about it, which is why it's good to have stuff like this where you can talk to people and like hear from folks who are going through it, and, you know, who can, you know, talk about some of these things that aren't explicit anywhere. So that would be my least favorite part. Just the fact that there are things that it seems like you're supposed to just know, but nobody really tells you. So that'd be that for me.
I'm not in grad school yet, but this has been my experience watching some of my friends, especially the people who are slightly older or like at the end of their grad school career. And that's the income differential between them and their friends. So I have a lot of friends whose friends have started to get married, and, you know, it's tough to like know that a lot of your friends are on this wage trajectory that you're not yet on or are never going to be on. And so things like bachelorette parties really add up, and you want to be there for your friends, but they're not thinking, oh, like my friends who are in graduate school can't afford it.
Yeah, I would say that while I think that on some level, I really like the timing of being able to be flexible with your time, but sometimes I think that what can happen in grad school is that you know, you can do your work from wherever in this weird way where you feel like maybe you could always be working. And so as someone who's in a partnership with someone who works a 40-hour week, that can sometimes be very strange, where you can't match sometimes very well in terms of your work time with other people. So this is relevant for like friends and potentially romantic partners who have 40-hour week jobs. And so that's something that I would say is like one of the things that I don't love about grad school is how we haven't all come around to, and I mean, like, there's no standardized way to do this. You know, we're not setting 40-hour weeks for people. So I don't have like a policy solution for this, but it's just something that I think can be hard.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, my least favorite part of grad school is having to take exams, because I absolutely just hate test taking. I get anxiety and I'm just like not very good at taking tests. But that's not really like specific to grad school. So I think like probably like the thing I dislike the most about grad school is just feeling like it's not set up in a way. I guess like feeling like the way it's set up like leaves potential for a lot of people to get left behind, and that just like is frustrating to me. Like I think like very often about the fact that like I'm not scared to, I mean, sometimes I'm scared, but like, I think I'm less scared than some of my colleagues to like speak up or like approach someone. And then I think like, well, why does that have to be like, why does like assertiveness have to be a skill that I like need to work on, or that people need to work on in order to be a good academic? Like, why isn't it set up in a way where it is more approachable and it's catering to different personality types, since like that isn't like a necessary feature of being a good academic. So I think there are aspects like that that I dislike about it.
Should we end on the negative note?
Absolutely. Just keep it really real.
Yeah, right. I was actually gonna amend my negative note. Just that one more not great thing about grad school sometimes. And it kind of came up when Alex was talking about the 40-hour week thing. Grad school isn't really something, or academia isn't really something you can leave at work, right? So you don't. I mean, it's almost. I mean, you have time off sometimes. You can but you have to very explicitly say, okay, now I'm not thinking about my grad school stuff, because if you're not really explicit about that, you got to realize that the tool you're using for work is like in your head. Like so you're potentially always thinking about this stuff. Whereas if you have a 40-hour week job, you can maybe leave it at home. I mean, leave it at work. You can leave it at work, right? You can leave the office and then go home and do home stuff. But if you're in grad school, that's kind of it. Like, you are making yourself into the tool for which you're using to further your career. So that's kind of a double-edged sword. But because you like thinking about this stuff. That's why you're doing it. That's why you're in grad school. But it's kind of like making your hobby your job.
I think there's a better way to think about it. So someone once told me that as an academic, you have to think of yourself as an entrepreneur. Your next business venture is whatever next project you're working on.
For sure.
And you have to take care of yourself because you're the brains behind the operation, and but at the same time, you want your business to survive. So there is this incentive to work as much as you possibly can. So it's all about, I think it's interesting that academics could think of themselves as entrepreneurs, because I think a lot of us couldn't actually think of ourselves as entrepreneurs. But yeah, so that's how I like to think about it, actually. Yeah. And as a business owner or an entrepreneur, you should be working on stuff that gets you up every morning because it's hard. And I don't like ending things on a negative note. I want to say, if you wake up saying this is my purpose in life, I love doing what I do. I think I don't know, I'm not in grad school yet, but I mean, I'm on that path, and I like to stick to it.
I tell myself that a lot, you know what I'm saying? Because, like I said, even at the beginning when we talked about this, I've always wanted to be academic. So, a lot of times when I'm getting down, I'm like, look, you're doing the thing that, if you could re-roll everything, you would be in the same spot.
Yeah.
You get to think about cool ideas as your career. That's awesome. That's an objectively cool thing to be able to do. So that's great. Sometimes you want to take a break, but still, it's all in all, it's a great thing. It's a cool way we have society set up that some people can do this, and it's a privilege. And appreciating that is important. Appreciating that is important.
You actually got us right to the question I wanted to end on, which is what gets you up in the morning? What's I think Steph used the phrase, the fire in your belly right now.
Yeah. It's that Pitbull song, Fire Burning on the Dance Floor. No, but that's sorry. I'm it's Saturday, guys. But yeah, I think that, and the fact that a lot of my friends now call me a tax lady, which is the best nickname I've ever received.
I like to see the list.
Ever received? No, tax lady is by far the best.
For sure. Yeah, that's cool. I think for me, it's doing social science is really interesting, because you're studying the sorts of things that you're studying how people live good lives, right? Not even from a philosophical perspective as to what it means to be a good, what it means to be a good person, what it means to live a good life, but you're studying the sorts of things like material well-being, right? You're studying the things that really, really matter for the way that our society is organized, for the way that people move through the world, and they're able to feed their families and be safe and be healthy. And that's a big responsibility. But it's a motivating thing to be able to say, like, look, the stuff that I'm working on, these aren't just academic questions, right? These aren't just, I'm not just studying this stuff. It's not a brain teaser, right? When I do this work, like, there can be a real impact to me finishing it. And I think that should be the responsibility of all social scientists. Not everybody takes that responsibility seriously, but like, it's something that can get you through some of the harder parts. It's like, okay, I'm not just learning these skills to meet some arbitrary requirements. Like, this could help somebody. So it's a strong motivating factor for me to get through some of these courses that are tough, and, you know, patient. That's tough, but it's a good thing.
I think that there's some like optimistic belief that what you're studying, there's some like flow between academic work, policymakers, journalists, public knowledge about subjects that, like, if you're like me and you believe, you hopefully believe that what we do as academic economists, maybe it's not that people around the world read your paper, but maybe your paper pushes things in some direction that then gets someone to write like the op-ed piece that gets to everyone. You know, there's some like filtering of communal knowledge that gets created that at least I think we all hope pushes things in a good direction for society. But then also I think that even beyond that, just like I think for me, like just being really curious about certain questions is a big motivating factor. So like, I'm an empirical economist, and so when I get like new data, like just wanting to dig in that and like wanting to learn everything I can about it is just like, I'm just that like internal curiosity where even if someone else isn't asking you about it, just you wanting to know, oh, well, what if I cut it this way? Like, what does that look like? What percentage is this? Just finding like pieces of your work that you're just inherently really curious about that you'll just naturally work on. That's been something for me that has really kept me going. It's just like wanting to know the answers to many, many, like often tiny little questions, but that for some reason I'm like obsessed and curious about.
Yeah. I totally agree on this idea that the research that we're doing can actually, like, one, that it's really important, and two, that it can actually like lead to changes in people's well-being. For me, that was like, that realization is why I decided to pursue a PhD. So when I first started the job in Kenya, where I was a research associate managing a field team there, and I was skeptical at that time. And then over those 2 years, seeing all these different research projects that were being done in Kenya that had led to like literally nationwide policies that were affecting people's physical well-being, or like the access to different utilities, and just seeing that it was so direct in that context and happen all the time. That's, you know, like definitely like a sort of shining example that you don't find many of those, but seeing that showed me like, okay, being an academic does not mean just divorcing yourself from like the reality of everyone who's actually needing to deal with these issues, which I think up until then is what I had largely associated academia with, was sort of separating yourself from the problems that people are dealing with in very like tangible ways every day. So I think understanding that academia actually has like a huge role to play in understanding what's going on in our societies and putting forward solutions. And so I find that motivating.
100%.
I want to add that there are certain things that, like, if the following list is what gets you up in the morning, then maybe being an academic is not the right path. So if you're trying to be an academic for like recognition or fame, probably shouldn't be an academic. There are better ways to get that. Like, these are really important things, right? Like, getting a PhD because everyone else in your family has one is not necessarily the right answer. Like, I would think really long and hard about why you want to do this, because it's tough and you have to self-lead, and it's hard to separate your work from your self, your sense of self. So I think like those, there are probably more things on that list, but those are the things that came to my mind. Yeah, I think like we're all huge nerds on this panel. And that's what gets us up in the morning, is that we're all like so into what we do that it's, you know, it's hard not to.
Yeah. I say this all the time, but like doing a PhD, like it's a weird thing to want to, it's a weird thing. Like it's not like objectively speaking, like spending like 6-7 years looking at like one pretty specific sort of thing. It's pretty weird. But, you know, it's a special kind of weird, I think, and it's one that's that the world kind of needs. And so it's good to be weird in that way. I would say seems like it. So, so yeah.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that. And I know that it's all of you have busy schedules and lots of research and work and sleep to be had. That means a lot here.
Yes, thank you so much. Can we clap it up for our panel?
Yeah.
Thank you with the big claps, yes.
And shout out to Coleal High for helping to recruit panelists, as well as Mariana Rodriguez, who is watching us from YouTube.
Fantastic.
Shout out to Mariana Rodriguez. She's a senior in economics as well at Williams.
And to Archie for making this possible as well.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Fighting, as well as to Professor Sarah Jacobson in economics and Professor Greg Ferryland for providing funding. So with that being said, I guess, do y'all have any last words or? Okay, so that's it. So thank you so much.
Wait, can I say something? 3 of us are on Twitter. If you guys need anything, you can reach out.
That's true. That's true.
I'm speaking for myself. If you need anything, you can reach out.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'm not on Twitter, but you can get my email address and I'll
get him on Twitter.
Yeah, you can get my email address too.
Maybe eventually, but if you want to reach out by email, please feel free. I'm happy to talk more about, answer any questions you have. Yeah.
Same.
Thank you again.
Great, thank you.
Have a
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Success.